All right, it's another episode of Is This Secure? I'm Michael, he's Curtis. Hey, babe. How you doing over there?
This episode is hopefully with less delay.
I noticed this time you could actually respond to me at the inception of the show rather than awkwardly leave me hanging as a result of delay. I didn't actually get around to expanding upon this in the last show, but in order for us to communicate with one another, we're using a platform called CleanFeed that gives you, I mistakenly called it Clearwire on the last show, and then we went down a long rabbit hole about something else. But it allows two people in remote locations to connect with one another in audio form like this, and for there to be ultra low latency and for the audio quality to sound really nice. But the problem is it includes a feature that allows you to record the audio at the network level rather than just recording it locally via whatever recording mechanism you choose to use. Well, on the last show, Curtis stupidly and idiotically chose to use the feature that was plainly presented to him for use with a button on his screen. What kind of an idiot actually clicks the button and uses features that are presented to him, rooted in the idea that it's there for your enjoyment and for you to take advantage of? What kind of idiot does that? But he clicked the button, and as soon as he did, the whole thing just took a giant crap, and we had a whole ton of latency. And if you listen to the previous episode, you'll hear me talking to Curtis, and then I start wondering, well, is Curtis having a medical moment of some sort, or is there intervention required right now? But no, it was just latency. So that's how we do this show. I think it sounds nice enough, Curtis, that if we didn't inform the listening audience that we are in remote locations, they might very well have zero idea of that being the case.
I was impressed as I was listening back to the episode that it sounded like we were in the same room. You had a better microphone than me, but we were in the same room.
Of course.
And I was like 5 minutes behind you in time. So it's like you would reach up to give me a high five, and 5 minutes later, I'd reach my hand up and smack myself in the head.
It wasn't quite five. I would say it was 5 minutes in dog years.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad. It was bad enough that you said, "Hey, babe," and I went.
And I just thought,
it was great.
That was Curtis's
probably my best
contribution.
intro.
That was Curtis's contribution to the previous episode. Anyway, thank you for joining us. And by the way, if you are listening to me telling you this at this moment, you probably already know this. Well, maybe not, because you may have found us on iTunes or via any of the numerous platforms we will be submitting this podcast to. But you can visit our website, which is isthisSecure.com, isthisSecure.com. And right now, it looks rather cookie cutter. It's not quite where we want it to be. I mean, we're going to get it there. It's all just a matter of, at this point, Curtis is ransoming the situation. For every $20 I send him, he will improve one of the blocks on the page. So
one block.
It's really been a bit of a slog. I've been doing some overtime, and I'm trying to make this happen for you and me, for you, the listening audience, and me. So that's isthisSecure.com.
One thing I love about that, so it's using an Elementor, if you've ever used that theme, or not theme, but that theme builder. And like, I wired it up before we had our first episode to where when you hit the start listening button on the homepage, it would actually have the episode, like the most recently posted podcast episode. Easy enough to do. Don't click that link right now, like literally right now as we're recording this. You click it later because we'll have it fixed, because Michael will have sent $20 by that time. But if you click it, it just doesn't do anything. It just sits there.
Well, when I click it takes me to somebody's OnlyFans page. It is a
wait, what? Hold on.
I'm not sure how much you're going to improve upon this, but
it is that. Just so you know, that is a live feed.
Are we in the business of fixing things that are not necessarily broken? That's the only question I'm posing here. So anyway, isthisSecure.com, and you can find previous episodes. You can find the RSS feed. and just generally anything else that we would like you to find. Things we don't want you to find, well, guess what? We're not going to put them on there, okay?
Well, I'm going to put them on there, and
Oh,
if you
boy.
find it,
Oh, boy.
whatever.
Okay, so you did not provide this in your list of links, the Elon story that you were talking about prior to air. You want to run that by me again?
Yeah, so in between our episodes, there was a very interesting thing. It's a nice update to our story we talked about, where Elon had sent out an email to the entire company saying they're going extreme hardcore, late nights, long hours. Click yes if you agree. If you don't click yes by Friday, you get 3 months severance and you're done. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so he follows up to the development teams, which is a pretty large development team within Twitter. And he says, send me, I might get some of the details somewhat wrong on this, but from memory, it's send your 10 best or most recent lines of code you contributed to Twitter, send it to me in an email, and then come up to my office on whatever floor of the big office there in San Francisco they're at, and be prepared to present it in a code review. And this is basically that threat of you need to be contributing code that makes a difference. So people started scrambling and freaking out, the ones who wanted to be there still. And people were asking him through their HR, what if I'm not in San Francisco? And he literally told them, it's in your best interest to get a plane ticket and get here before midnight, because I'll stay until midnight doing these reviews.
Wow.
And he said you could send a video, but in person will be prioritized. So they had that. And there's like, if you go on, like Twitter right now is in like this renaissance of ridiculousness that I can't even describe. But there's all these fake tweets people are doing of what it's like, what the room looked like before the code review call or code review meetings, and then after the code review meeting. I can't even do them justice. You just have to go look for Twitter developer meetings and search for that, and you'll find it.
I think, though, there is an element of what is Elon? Is he in his mid-40s-ish? Something like that?
Yeah, I'm going to guess that.
I think there's a bit of a generational gap here as well, because up to this point, Twitter has largely been a company run by millennials, staffed by millennials, and I don't mean to get into millennial bashing because it's the low-hanging fruit, and it's such an easy thing to do. It is so easy to bash millennials. It's not even sporting. How I'm getting saying that to you, I'm bashing millennials.
Yeah. The thing is, though, like you're saying that, you have to recognize that this is a generational thing that's built into humanity. For every generation that feels like there's less sunlight in front of them than there is behind them, they start to feel and say these things. And it has ebbs and flows. Right now, the ebb is very big, and it's easy for you to make the statement you are, but it's not like millennials are the first group to get picked on. Is it fair anytime? No. But is it part of just the one generation versus another because there's more sunlight in front of the other generation? There's jealousy as much to it as there is everything else you're going to say.
And the outgoing generation feels like the upcoming generation is wasting all of their sunlight.
Right.
You don't understand what the bounty that lies before you and the ways in which you're squandering it.
Right. The thing is, they are doing that, but it's theirs to do it too. So
that is true.
They're going to screw it up just like we screwed it up.
Well, I think it's a generational thing to bring people, employees, into the office of the boss, put them in a chair in front of the boss, and say, explain to me what it is I'm paying you for. That is not something that I think the typical Twitter employee is accustomed to. I think that in companies like Twitter, employees are judged more by how do they fit into the politics of the company? How well do they navigate the minefield that is political activism and virtue signaling? And I hate to even use that term because it is a thing. People do make decisions, active decisions, to signal their own virtue. And in many instances, it's corporations, corporate entities that are doing this. And in my way of seeing the universe, the notion of a corporation signaling virtue anyway, or having any opinions about anything, or expressing opinions about anything, as if that is just a locked in, ubiquitous consensus among all employees who work under this this storied umbrella that is our company. You know, that's not reality to think that everyone who works for XYZ corporate enterprise feels this way. Everyone who works for Coca-Cola believes that men should be participating in women's swim competition. I mean, there is no universal thought process behind the sea of humanity working for a giant corporate interest. But the corporate interest itself, as a legal entity, expressing opinions, having an opinion, putting its opinion out there, or otherwise trying to signal some level of morality, to me is offensive. It's sort of like being pulled over by a police officer and you're doing 85 in a 65 and you act like you don't know why the police officer pulled you over. You deserve a ticket just for insulting his intelligence. You deserve a ticket just for being a jerk and essentially suggesting that he's dumb enough that a few simple words strung together, coming right out of your mouth, are going to alleviate the situation. It's insulting, just as the idea of a corporate interest that ultimately exists for the purpose of making as much money as possible has a sense of morality. It does not. It merely calculates that the expression of a particular sense of morality is more likely to be profitable than not. So that's the only calculation that's made. There's not some sort of soul searching. There's not, yeah, we here at Pfizer, we really are just...
Well, there goes that advertiser.
Oh, well, you know what?
I was working on the deal behind the scenes with them. You were going to have to pay me $20 a day anymore.
I'm just tired of corporate enterprises that exist for the purpose of squeezing as much money out of as many people as possible, all the while continually diminishing the services or goods provided and simultaneously increasing the prices for said diminished services. Ever heard of corporate shrinkage out there, everybody? I'm just really tired of it. And in an organization, to tie this all back, in an organization like Twitter, I think that your ability, your willingness, and the skill with which you navigate the politics of all of this is viewed in 2022 as being as or even more important than the actual contributions you give to the company, that you bring to the company, the actual bottom line, the money you make for the company. That's secondary, I think.
Well, I think you're describing a period of time, potentially, that it is going away.
I think it is. I think it is, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's happening when you're in a boom. That wasn't a delay. That was me just taking a moment to think about the next word I was going to say.
Curtis, we need immediate responses. Boom, boom, boom. I finished my sentence. I need you in there. Boom.
Okay, I've written 10 lines of code. The first one was hello. The second one was world.
We're not going to do this here, Curtis. We're going to get up. We're going to walk to my office. We're going to do this.
Hold on.
All right.
Knocking on your door there.
I'll sit in the soft chair. You can have this box.
We're not going to do the bathtub this time?
Oh, I forgot about that. Okay, you were saying
I brought candles this time.
You think that this is a phenomena surrounding moments of prosperity, and I would agree.
Yes, that's an easy way to, or a good way, not easy, good way to describe it. The other thing I'd say is that just generally speaking, taking all the other pieces of current popular and political points of view, just in general humanity, when humanity is fumbling around through the mess, trying to be better, we're generally good. When pointed a direction and said, go this way, or I would prefer you to go this way, humanity screws that up every time. Like, I would like to hear a moment in the existence of humanity where some top-down leader said, this is the best direction we should go, and then people tried to follow it with the best of intentions and saw it go to a good place. It just, I can't come up with one right now. Feel free to send us a message however you can if you can come up with it. But let me bring this back to the next article that I wanted to talk about. Not even article. It takes you. It's actually a Reddit thread, which I think is great. So Elon tweeted the whiteboard at 10 p.m. of their plan. And Reddit, of course, grabbed it. Reddit being a slightly different version of Twitter, I guess, a more in-depth conversation of any one thing or memeing than Twitter would be. But they took the whiteboard and just went for it, calling it Twitter for Dummies. And it's great. Like if you read through the comments of it, how they start bringing up like comic book characters and fake names for different products that they should be doing. And then like one comment was, send 10 pictures of your most salient Sharpie lines. It's great.
Sorry, I was adjusting your audio levels there.
It was okay. Literally what I said was so important that that you needed to do that. Basically, the end of the day, all this stuff that they did in their big code review / prove your worth is this flow chart or diagram, I guess actually probably is more accurate of what it is, of what Twitter will be. And it's funny to see that ads, ad generation, ad insertions, it's still an important part of Twitter. It's not going away under Elon.
You know, I think it's easy to naysay Twitter right now, and I'm not even saying that's what you're doing. I'm just saying at this moment, that is the popular opinion, to naysay Twitter. There are even people saying, go ahead and download your content from Twitter now because it's going to probably go down. The service is going to go down soon. I mean, I'm literally seeing people posting this. Download your Twitter data now because the site's going to go down, and when it does, I don't know how you're going to get your data, all the pictures and posts, which I don't know what you would do with Twitter. What are you going to parse Twitter data with to make the information usable? So you'd have to have like extensive database experience.
Wasn't the point of Twitter though was to get the little things out of your head and just give it to the world and move on? So like,
well, you're going to want to save all that, Curtis.
I'm going to need every time I said, hey, don't forget to click this link for some reason.
Every time I picked up my phone and typed, well, that was a wet one, and hit send.
Right.
I'm going to want those. And if I think those could be lost as a result of Elon Musk purchasing Twitter, somebody's going to be a little upset over here, at least in this zip code. I'll tell you that.
Oh, think about the database parsing. Like you could say exactly what day and what hour you spent the most time, or what is the trends? Why aren't they selling you toilet paper? You know,
well,
like
you could manage all of that with your Twitter data. You have the expertise to do it. But the average person who's, I heard Twitter shut. I mean, if you even thought that was a thing that you needed to go and download your Twitter data because you saw on a Jeff Jarvis blog post that Twitter is probably going to go down and you better get your data. Well, if you're willing to believe that and then actually follow through, chances are you don't know how to do anything with that data that you've downloaded anyway, I would say.
Well, you know, like in the theme of the title of our show is this secure. That data, the moment you've given it over to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, like really quick question. What do you call Instagram? I need to know before we finish. Like, I'm ready to end this podcast if you answer incorrectly.
What do I call it?
Instagram's official name.
Oh,
like if you're talking to your buddies, what do you say when you say, I posted on Instagram some photos and
I would never say that to one of my friends.
No,
I think the answer I just gave you is the correct answer. I would never say that to one of my
that is the correct answer.
Oh, thank you.
If you ever are talking to somebody, and I'm sorry I guess I'm not sorry, if this alienates like half or 2/3 or 99% of our audience, if you call it Insta, literally delete the podcast app you're listening to this on and throw your phone away.
No, I call it Inst. So I was on my Inst earlier. I like to end it with that hard consonant just so that it flows real nice and easily out of your mouth. So I was on my Inst account earlier, and I want to tell you something. I'm really building a following, an Inst following. It's really a pleasure to behold the greatness that is me on Inst.
You know, can we create an app called, instead of Twitter, Pooper? And then like have people post like, hey, on the toilet again. Yep.
Oh, they stopped?
10 minutes now.
I've been doing it like 3 times daily. I didn't know the trend had ended. I'm going to have to revise and reevaluate.
That brings a whole new thought to trending, doesn't it?
You know, I was going to say a moment ago, I think the trend right now is to naysay Twitter, and it is to suggest that you better download your data because it's going away and the whole thing's going to be a train wreck. I think in a year from now, Twitter is going to be so awesome. Even right now, just using it, the energy that I'm feeling on there, it feels so good. I just feel like, I don't know, man. It just feels unshackled to me.
Well, things come right now. There's some chaos to it, which is what Twitter was in the early days too.
Yeah, really. You know what? You nailed it. That is the feeling that is rubbing me well, is rubbing me nicely, rubbing me thoroughly, rubbing
Thank
me
you for
deeply.
That was such.
That is exactly what it comes down to. It's chaotic right now, and this sort of communication platform is not supposed to, was not originally intended, and I don't think can survive as something homogenized, something ultra managed, something where the level of autonomous, that's the worst sort of micromanagement. Autonomous micromanagement is the order of the day and the currency on which everything is either allowed to pass through the gate or not. Right now, the chaos and the uncertainty and the feeling, I'm not saying it necessarily is freedom, but there's a definite perception and feeling of freedom on Twitter right now. And I'm finding it to be, I will tell you, I'm checking Twitter probably 15 or 20 times a day. If I have a moment, I'm just popping in there.
I mean, I think I have responded to more tweets in the last week than I have in at least a year, if not more. I guess actually I would say it's been like 2 or 3 years. So I agree. And the thing too is that if you believe in any of the negatives that have been talked about with social media, about how it's gamed and geared in a certain direction to get you to engage with it when it is troublesome, like when you see pictures and posts about puppies and teddy bears and all of that, you're less likely to engage than if you're angry about something. Or I would substitute chaotic. Like if we are to believe a lot of the research that's been put out there about the negatives of social media, but having it be open chaos, but not like negative chaos. I don't know the right way to say that. Not like trying to create chaos, but just is chaos, to where when you go there, you're going to create your experience rather than know your curated experience. That has you already engaged, and that's the perfect platform for advertisers, real advertisers who want to sell something, that aren't trying to create, that aren't selling clicks, links, a look, a feel, all the things that Instagram, I would say, is known for, but not very good at executing on. I really don't understand how anyone makes money on that other than a funnel to your own website or selling your products on your own e-commerce platform. I can't see how you make money actually on Instagram. But Twitter, if we can stay like this and do better, and I'm going to say the positive side of the coin, but I'm also going to mention another side too. But that seems like the perfect place for advertisers to be successful, because you already have people who are really fully engaged compared to expectations of what's curated for them. Now, on the negative side, with what Elon's doing and the chaos and what could be considered a short-term positive bump, and then you could have the hockey stick go down kind of experience, is that this is a real test of his execution ability. Because when you look at the story of him, you've got his investment in PayPal, and of course that was very successful. You've got SpaceX, you've got Tesla, you've got the Boring Company. All these things seem to be pretty successful, and they have moments of trouble and trials and tribulation. And you hear the stories of him sleeping on the factory floor at Tesla, which is similar to the kind of emotions he's trying to evoke with Twitter right now. We don't know how successful his management style was in getting Tesla to be successful. I don't know if we're definitely calling them fully successful, or are they still a subsidized business making money off of promises? I don't know for sure what their real description in the business world would be. SpaceX, I think, is probably pretty successful because they're putting
government
a lot of
contract.
Yeah, I mean, they're putting a lot of rockets.
That's all you
into
need
space.
to know. Government contract. Right. Next conversation.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about Teslas. I don't know for sure. Like, I'm sure I could find this information. I believe they're publicly traded, but I don't know how much of their sales versus costs. Are they a profitable company for real, or are they a subsidized profitable company? So I want to be careful what I say there. And I know nothing of the backgrounds of the Boring Company, so I won't even try to dissect that. But like, we don't know if Elon actually has a successful business model that he's applied, or management philosophy, I guess is probably a better way to say it, because obviously business wise he bought Twitter for $44 billion, so there's some level of success there. But can his management style take Twitter, keep the chaos that it's going through now, ride the ship all the way through, not even ride it, just ride it, and then bring it into something that 6 months from now is still interesting and maybe even profitable? This is a pretty big gamble in terms of his stature in just the internet culture right now, because he's very much into meme culture, and right now it works with him being in it and playing it, but he could become the ultimate meme of failure if things go the other direction.
Just a little bit of a change of direction. This is something Curtis brought to the show today. It's from the BBC archive, 2001. Cameras on phones?
Now, the craze for sending text messages shows no sign of abating. In fact, last month, people in Britain sent over 1 billion of them.
And in the background, they got the little image hanging over his head, and it's like an old Nokia brick, like the kind you could, if you can't get the cork out of a wine bottle, you beat the top of the wine bottle with this telephone. It's coming open.
In fact, last month, people in Britain sent over 1 billion of them. But now a new generation of phones is about to hit the streets, and these handsets can send not only text, but take and send pictures as well, as Rory Catherine-Jones now explains.
At the school gate on the way home, evidence of the text messaging craze is everywhere. The phone makers never expected it to take off. It was teenagers who decided this was the way to keep in touch.
I send about 15 a day.
I send about 20 because I just love texting people.
I think it's bloody bollocks that I walk down the street, I see all these teenagers.
But with mobile phone sales expected
These are millennials, by the way, now, aren't they?
Christmas,
Nah, I think these kids are, these people are a little old for that, aren't they? Because I think
Are they
a lot of the
2001 they were teenagers?
Yeah, so that'd be 21 years ago. Say they're 15, 25. They'd be about 36. They'd be at the tail end of the millennial generation.
All right.
the industry is desperate for a new gimmick. This could be it. Next year, phones with cameras built in will arrive in the shops. The idea is that wherever you are, at Buckingham Palace or on the bus home, you can send your friends or family a photo with a message attached.
He shows the picture, and it's just a pixelated pile of shit.
But you could also use that picture. That picture you could use to open a bottle of wine too.
A photo with a message attached.
It brings a whole new dimension to the mobile phone industry, allowing people to take images, send them.
It also brings a whole new dimension to relationships and political sex scandals, which we will see in the years to come.
And for people to receive not just color images, but also text and audio as a message.
I was hoping to be black and white photos.
The mobile phone industry is desperately hoping that in a year or so we'll all be sending these kind of messages. Even now we're spending over £100 million a month just on text messages, and this could...
Oh, aren't you glad that era went away?
Well,
just having this bucket of metered minutes and metered text messages. And that's something I will never forgive the mobile industry for, is the price that they put on text. A lot of people forget about this. You know, we live in an era now of unlimited data, and people forget how badly the mobile industry, the mobile communications industry screwed all of us for so many years, charging us for text messages. What is it, 140K of data?
Well, this all kind of ties together because like early Twitter was also, you had so few characters because of data rates.
Is that what it comes out to? Is it 140K?
I mean, it's part of it. That was like that was one of the early things about it. But by the time it got popular, it was irrelevant. But I want to bring stuff like this every once in a while to us because it kind of level sets us to remember just in 2001, we didn't have cameras on phones, and we were paying for text messages. Those kids said they send 15 to 20 text messages, and that was a lot for them. Think about how often you're sending text messages now.
You know, my mum, she don't send text messages because she's old and doesn't understand tech, but I do understand tech. That's why I send 12 to 14 messages per day.
The whole mobile phone industry is desperately hoping that in a year or so we'll all be sending these kind of messages. Even now we're spending over £100 million a month just on text messages, and this could be an even bigger money spinner. Sending a picture will cost 2 or 3 times as much as an ordinary text message. Not everyone's convinced it's the next big thing.
The takeoff of texting did surprise a lot of people, but picture texting is something, again, it needs a lot more network capacity, and I think you've got to persuade all your friends to pay hundreds of pounds for this piece of kit if you're going to use it at all. So I think we're a little way off seeing picture texting becoming a mass market thing just yet.
They once told us it was good to talk, but mobile phone networks saddled with big debts know their profits now depend on persuading us that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Rory Catherine-Jones, BBC News.
It's interesting to think that the mobile industry in Britain was saddled with debt at this time. I guess it was just sort of, they were in that major infrastructure rollout phase that went on for several years, particularly from after the demise of analog cell phone technology and the advent of digital cell phone technology. Essentially, everything had to be rebuilt. I mean, that's not to say they had to like tear down the towers that existed, but they certainly had to gut them, and the technology was entirely different. But do you recall when we went from analog cell phone technology to digital? Do you recall the degradation in audio quality and phone calls?
Oh, yeah.
It was night and day, the difference. I mean, I understood the advantage to digital because it's ones and zeros, and it's a much narrower spectrum of RF that's being transmitted, and so there's very little waste, as opposed to the original analog cell phones. You had a carrier wave, and then that carrier wave had to be modulated. You were literally transmitting audio over RF the way you would at a radio station. I mean, isn't that crazy to consider? Yeah. It was like a walkie-talkie that just happened to operate with numbers, so you could see why it just chewed through the battery. You had to walk around with these things. You could beat somebody. You weren't going to get mugged while you were walking around with one of these bag phones, because you had a fantastic weapon at your disposal at any moment. You could walk around and pretend to talk on it. People aren't going to mug you because, oh my God, he's got a phone. I can't mug a guy with a phone. I mean, I might get caught. Or he might just beat me with the phone. One of the two is going to happen. And
well, think back then, man. If you got attacked with one of those, that phone was your best chance of success of beating them off, because. Okay, cut that out.
I'm going to put it on a loop. We're going to loop that shit. In fact, it's just going to be a drop. I'm going to probe that. I'm going to put that on one of my Roadcaster buttons here. I'm going to put it on that. Let's see what color. Pink. It's going on the pink button. Curtis talking about beating some dude off. Yeah, that's pink.
Okay, I can't breathe now. All right. So what I was going to say there was, rather than that, you called for 911.
I was going to comment on it as you said it, and then I thought, it's just so easy. I don't like going for things that are just. It's why I felt bad about beating up the millennial generation. I'm not going to gratuitously beat up the millennial generation, and I'm not going to saddle Curtis with feelings of regret over his beating men off in public bathrooms comment that he just made.
I have to take my glass. I can't see. I'm crying now. But it's a good cry.
Well, you know what? While you're collecting yourself, let me go into this. Verizon, and this is another of your stories that you brought to the pile. Verizon has introduced a new early access program that allows you to test its network for up to 30 days. There's no SIM card involved. Instead, it's a showcase for eSIM technology to allow folks from other carriers to compare between services. The Verizon Test Drive program, like rival eSIM-based trial programs from T-Mobile and AT&T, is completely free but does require an unlocked compatible phone. Ultra-wideband 5G, 5G nationwide, and 4G LTE are available to try out, in addition to 100 gigabytes of data and unlimited talk and text. I will tell. And this was from The Verge, by the way. The Curtis's jerk-off comment was from Curtis. This was from The Verge. That was from Curtis. You know, I want to tell you this. I've been on T-Mobile for years, and I was watching all these videos on YouTube about a Verizon MVNO, which MVNO stands for Mobile Virtual Network Operator. And that's essentially a company that piggybacks on one of the big three cell phone companies' infrastructure, so they don't have to have their own towers. They don't have to have their own physical infrastructure. They can simply arrange a billing arrangement with one of the big three wireless companies, and then they can begin selling service. It's a reseller sort of thing. Well, there's a Verizon MVNO called US Mobile, and everywhere I looked on YouTube, people were going on and on and on about what a great deal it is, how fantastic it is, how it's not using second-tier deprioritized data, that it's actually... And I saw people running utilities on mobile devices that showed you what sort of prioritization on the network the packets are getting. And so I switched. And let me tell you something. I was in a giant, festering, steaming, tepid pool of regret shortly after switching from T-Mobile to this Verizon reseller. And I thought,
I'm glad you did this because I've always worried about it.
Yeah, and you know something? I tried an MVNO one other time. This was back, I think, in around 2015, and I went to Virgin Mobile. And actually, Virgin Mobile in 2015 worked better for me than US Mobile did in 2022. And I thought to myself, well, you know, Verizon has this reputation as a company that has the best network. They've got the best data. It's just you're paying for a premium when you go to Verizon, and there's a reason for it. Well, I haven't been a Verizon customer in a lot of years. But I have a friend who is a Verizon customer, and he swears by it. Well, it turns out that I have just gotten to the point where I take T-Mobile for granted. So I'll be in a good network area on T-Mobile. For instance, if I'm in most of the town, most of this entire town I live in is covered by T-Mobile's ultra capacity network. So if I run speed test, I'm going to get downloads of about 350 megabits per second and upload at about 75-ish megabits per second, which I consider to be fantastic. But I started taking it for granted when I moved over to this. And I thought, well, it's a Verizon MVNO, and it's not using deprioritized data. The data is supposed to be at the same tier as actual Verizon customer data. And I was at Six Flags a few weeks ago with Nabila and the kids, and I wanted to send her a picture. She was on the other side of the park, and long story, she needed a picture of my gate pass to get into the park. So I wanted to send that to her, and I swear to you, again, this is in Six Flags. It's right outside of St. Louis. It's a heavily populated area. It's actually technically Eureka, Missouri, but it's a suburb of St. Louis. And if you're going to expect good Verizon service anywhere, it's going to be in a location like this. I could not send this photo to her in iMessage. It would not do it. And then I tried to send her a video in iMessage. Forget about it. And then I made the mistake of attempting to download a few games in the App Store because I had a stupid Apple Arcade subscription, which is one of the most worthless things you can pay for, by the way. It's just a bunch of games that nobody wants to play. And you pay
There's a reason they're on that.
Yeah, you pay $4.99 a month for the pleasure of a bunch of bull crap you don't even want. But I tried downloading a couple of those games, and each of those was, give or take, 850 megabytes or maybe a gigabyte. I could do nothing. My phone was a useless brick. And that, to me, spoke volumes. And then a couple of days later, after I got moved back over to T-Mobile and realized the extent to which I had taken them for granted, my friend who has for years been just like a cheerleader, an evangelist for Verizon, was showing me the kind of data he's getting right outside of St. Louis on Verizon proper, not an MVNO, but actual Verizon. And he was downloading at like 25 megabits per second. He was uploading at about 6. And I just thought, you know what? I am sick of this company and the undeserved reverence it gets for the quality of its network, the robustness of its data infrastructure. I think Verizon has fallen behind, and I'm going to tell you something now. I think T-Mobile's where it's at. I think T-Mobile's got the best network. I can't tell you how many places I've been where I, in the past, didn't have coverage. Now I have ultra capacity. T-Mobile, particularly since the merger with Sprint, has really stepped it up. And they have eSIM, of course, as mentioned in the story that you submitted here, and that's what I'm using. I really recommend T-Mobile, but I'd be interested to know what your thoughts were as you decided to talk about this.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that at the end of that you said that you decided to go with T-Mobile rather than you're going to take a van up to the offices of Verizon and park it in front of it, because I was a little nervous.
You know something? This is a reference that I'm not sure this listening audience might quite understand. Curtis is employing inside jokes for the purpose of filling content on our show.
It's a deep cut.
It really is. You'd have to do a little bit of internet researching. Go ahead.
Yeah, so for me, the two things about this, I agree generally with your Verizon. So in the battles of the networks, I use AT&T, and I've been happy. So I used to be a Sprint customer. I used to work for T-Mobile, the old T-Mobile when they were called VoiceStream before. And they were the up-and-coming network and not that great at that point when it came to coverage. Pretty much you had to have an interstate. In the Midwest, you had to have an interstate near you to get good signal. But they definitely have grown their network since then. And I was a Sprint customer for a long time, very happy with them. And so I can see where that merger probably makes them better. But I'm an AT&T person. I've been happy with them since, 2010. I switched because of iPhone at first.
Can I butt in for just a moment? I
Sure.
didn't throw this in because I didn't want to make my little soliloquy any longer than it had to be there. But when I dumped US Mobile, the Verizon MVNO, I didn't go immediately back to T-Mobile. First, I went to AT&T, and it was embarrassing. I mean,
the speed?
Yes. In my home, 0.5 megabit per second up. Terrible. Right in the middle of town. I'm in a entirely populated area.
So everyone knows he lives on the town square.
I live in a box by the river. Now, it's a nice part of the river bank. Don't get me wrong. It's not what you have in your mind. It's
an Amazon box. It's pretty good. It's strong. It says heavy on the side.
I just was not at all impressed with AT&T. And so I just went back. There's no way I'm going to go anywhere around here. I'm probably going to have to go to a major metropolitan area in order to get the speeds I'm getting on T-Mobile on AT&T's network. And even then, I don't know if I'm gonna. I think they've all fallen behind T-Mobile.
So I guess I'll have to try them again at some point, because AT&T, I've been as happy as I can be with them, no problems. But this summer I moved. And where I moved is pretty much in the middle of a very populated area in the city I live in, very active. You would assume that I'd have perfectly good signal. It's right near a big retail area, right by a university. There's no reason not to have good signal. And I barely get 1 bar in my house. And it's an old house that's brick. So you would think, okay, go outside, you're going to get good signal. I go to my backyard, hold my phone.
Why
up
are
to
you
the
unwilling
air.
to stand outside every time you need to use your phone?
Well, I am. I prefer to do that when it's raining, because I'm sure that's better for the signal. But this is the first time I've run into a situation. I'm literally holding my hand up as if I'm showing you what it's like to make a phone call. But
I can sense it.
Yeah, I was hoping you could there, just in the way my voice changed a little bit. But other than that, I've been really happy with them. And I've looked at these other networks like Mint Mobile. There's, oh gosh, I can't think of the other names of them, but Walmart has one. Cricket, yeah. Like what worries me is if you remember back in the day with like applications, like we're talking about Windows XP to before Windows 10 really got popular, you would have sometimes programs that would be like for MP3 downloading or whatever. You could buy some program to do it, or you could get an open source one that could do all the same things, but it doesn't have the name on it. It doesn't have the marketing, and if it crashes, there's no one to help you. You're going to have to go to a message board to get assistance on it, but your experience will be just fine. And my worry was that these, what was it called, an NVMO?
MVNO.
MVNO, okay. So my worry was that those networks were the same idea where I could get equal service, just I'm not going to get, I don't have the same support team, but I don't care because I don't ever use the support team. I get the same signal. So the same bits are going on the same wire or wireless, whatever. And the only real difference is that I'm saving money. So I've been thinking about it, and I was thinking about going to one that would be on Verizon's because I'm interested in this test, like to do the free trial eSIM just to see if Verizon is any better in my area, but maybe you'll talk me into T-Mobile for it. I might go back to them after many, many years.
Well, if you do make your way over to T-Mobile, before you actually pull the trigger on that, let me squeeze some money out of you by doing some sort of referral. I think they have that. So if you're going to do it anyway, you might as well, cut me in.
Right. Well, yeah, I give you back some of that.
What are you going to not?
Right. What am I going to do? Yeah, I mean, it drives me crazy. So I have to have all of my family's phones on Wi-Fi calling, or you can't make a phone call inside or get a phone call inside our house. And that's annoying when your phone will switch off of it for any reason, and then suddenly you're not able to send or receive text messages. And I'm sitting in my house, like I can't text my kid. Like this is a modern world anyway, but my son upstairs, when I'm in the basement, I text him to go take the trash out. And 20 minutes later, I've gotten no response because when I look at my phone, it couldn't send the message. So come on.
It's like
I need to tell him to take the trash out.
It's like my kid goes down to the community water fountain to get buckets of water to bring back so that we can bathe. And I couldn't send my kid a text message to tell him or her to bring an extra bucket. And it's like, ugh.
Exactly. That's exactly how I feel. So I'm going to switch to T-Mobile so I can take a Tesla down there.
It's just a divergence of advancement there. We don't have running water, but I'm pissed. On the one hand, we're very first world, but on the other, it's hasn't really advanced. Yeah, I don't think I would waste my time with any MVNOs.
Yeah, that is probably the tip of this episode to take away with you. But the other thing about it is like with eSIMs, it's so convenient because we just upgraded all of our phones recently, and eSIMs are super convenient, but I really don't like the idea that your phone is now tied to this ID that you're passing. Like basically your IMEI number is so much easier to steal now from somebody who wanted to be nefarious than it was in the past with a physical SIM card.
But Curtis, there's multi-factor authentication.
I don't care. If I would have switched, like if you and I are hanging out and I said, hey man, let's do a phone swap or a SIM swap, that we could just do that. And as long as we had the right antenna in our phone, which now pretty much all of them do, then we could swap out our SIM cards and just go on like normal. But now, no, I've got to go deregister mine, then you deregister yours, then I register it, but I got to do a security code to make sure that I can get your SIM number. It's annoying. It's convenience for the sake of annoyance.
Apple is tracking you even when its own privacy settings say it's not. New research says this is from, well, hell, I don't know. I love the way I use Pocket to organize all my news stories. So you can just be sort of browsing around and you see something, I'd like to talk about this on the show. And so you add it to Pocket, and then you can go back to all of it later on any device that you're signed into Pocket on. But the nice thing that Pocket does is when you're looking at the URL on the story to see where it came from, this story came from getpocket.com. So apparently this is not from a news organization. Pocket is themselves the news organization. Not really, but I don't like the fact that they're sort of inserting their own URL over.
I made that mistake last episode with Bing. I used Bing and I would try to copy the URL for articles from it, and it inserts its own. Basically, it's like AMP. Google is big into AMP, and it delivers news faster to devices. But then it means that they're taking over the content basically, and that's what you're running into as Pocket is grabbing that and controlling it.
If you don't know what AMP is, like on most mobile devices, you do a Google image search and then you start swiping through the different images, and you'll see down at the bottom of the screen that the web page on which that image resides is already preloaded in sort of a frame. And then when you go to it, you're not actually going to the website. You're going to a cached copy of the website that's being provided to you by Google. I hate that. In fact, on my iPhone, I use a Safari extension called Overamped, which disables AMP, because I don't like having that down at the bottom of the screen like that. It just throws off my OCD, and I feel like my screen real estate's being wasted because it covers up a portion of an entire row of photographs. And I kind of feel like, well, there may be something there that catches my eye that I would want to see. I don't want it covered up with that.
You want to click that link that says, why did the Brady Bunch fall apart?
I want to see I want to see the actual website that contains that vital information that I was searching for. So anyway, Apple's tracking you. The iPhone analytic. Well, let me back up here. I got sidetracked by the Get Pocket bullcrap. Okay, so the iPhone analytics setting makes an explicit promise. Turn it off, and Apple says that it will disable the sharing of device analytics altogether. However, 2 app developers and security researchers have found that the analytics control and other privacy settings had no obvious effect on Apple's data collection. The tracking remained the same whether iPhone analytics was switched on or off. Apple did not respond to multiple requests for comment. This is yet another example, and I know I have pissed and moaned about this for years on the previous tech podcast that we did. The goodwill that Apple gets. I mean, the number of people who I see prattling on and on and on and on about, well, they use Apple products because they're concerned about their privacy, and they use Apple products because of the security that comes along with it. And I see stories like this, and it just seems to negate all of that. And added to that, the simple fact that there is a device that's being used by police departments all over the United States and throughout the world that allows law enforcement to connect a cable to your iPhone and bypass any number of security implementations.
Well, they don't have to do that, man. They can access. All they need to do is get that same IMEI number I mentioned earlier, and they can remotely install spyware on your phone that gives them full access to your phone. So that device
just by having the IMEI?
Yeah, that or getting you to click a link on a browser.
Oh, I don't click links on any browser.
Except for Get Pocket ones.
Ever. I have never clicked a link on a browser. I won't do it.
Well, it's because you are the most ardent user of FireFub, which makes sense. So
when I get a mobile device, I immediately smash the screen so that I won't accidentally do anything that compromises my security, because my privacy is important to me.
And then you put a screensaver on it.
The EU expands investigation into Microsoft's...
Well, really quick, let's go back to... Sorry, I want to go back to that. So with the goodwill that you mentioned that Apple devices get and Apple users give the company, it's a pet peeve of mine, because back in the day, I actually believed that Steve Jobs would say no when people would come to him and try to do the same kind of partnerships that made Microsoft become the juggernaut they are, where they're like, let's bundle this in the operating system or promote this product for this reason, and we'll give you this cut of the action. And there's these back doors that we're tracking stuff. And you look at now with Windows 11, there's all kinds of articles out there that are talking about how they're going to an advertising-based model to give you free windows so that your start menu will have more ads in it, which is already happening on Windows 10 when you try to uninstall Candy Crush and it keeps coming back. But Apple, I believed back in the day, that Steve Jobs would say no to those people just because he's that much of a contrarian. And with Steve Jobs gone, I don't know of anyone there who actually cares about privacy at the same level. They care about creativity and taking the last cool thing that Android phones did and turning it into their own with a spin on it. The Apple Silicon is really cool. Like, I'm not going to knock that. That's definitely a win for them. But other than that, I don't see modern Apple caring about my privacy for real in any way. So I'm not surprised by this article, and I personally don't buy Apple products specifically because I want to feel safe inside the walled garden anymore, because I don't believe it exists. And it does make me sad to think that there's people out there who don't realize that.
I just think that the fact that these devices exist, that law enforcement agencies can purchase from companies that are publicly operating in the clear, in the wild, for everybody to see, selling hardware that allows you to suck all the data off of an iPhone, no IMEI needed, no nothing, just connect the phone to the device, and you've got all the data on the phone. Are you telling me Apple, this is $1 trillion company now, is it not?
One of the largest in existence, yes.
You telling me that company doesn't have the resources to acquire one of these, figure out how it works, why it works, and patch that so that they can actually live up to the perception people have of them and their products? And
Well,
that
this
is
the
of
same company.
security and privacy and all of this. I mean, I do believe that it's not a matter of believing. I know that it's harder to do this sort of thing with an iPhone or with an Apple device than it is with Android devices, but it's still doable. And the fact that it remains doable, the fact that there are companies that actually pay employees and have stock that's publicly traded who manufacture this stuff that enables law enforcement to suck information off of iPhones. I don't want to hear anything else about iOS security. I don't want to hear anything else about Apple security. I don't want to hear that the reason Apple can't have side-loaded apps and third-party app stores is because of security. The whole thing is an illusion to begin with, and that illusion starts with the very simple fact that those devices even exist and are acquirable for purchase by law enforcement agencies.
Well, I'll say this. For me, the tide turned with Face ID. The moment that Apple starts selling a fairly advanced IR scanning and mapping tool to create accurate 3D models of an environment around it, and specifically a face, and they're selling it at a loss so that I'll use this device because they don't want to put a biometric reader, which I trust a lot more. And they tell me that this data is all being stored locally on my device, not going anywhere else, but I'm using it as the authentication gateway for all kinds of apps that are constantly accessing the internet. And in all mobile phones, whether it's Android or iOS, have a long history of app developers figuring out that they can access more data on the hardware than they expected. So I guarantee you that all these highly accurate 3D scans of everything around me all the time, that those, if they're stored on my phone or they're stored in the cloud, app developers are getting access to it. Like, I don't believe that. I don't believe the story that I was told when it comes to Face ID is for my benefit. I believe that, and that this is pretty much going into complete speculation here, but it's completely possible that just like when Microsoft sells an Xbox, they make the point to say that they lost money on it, but their plan is to get money back on the Xbox Gold subscription you're going to pay for forever, or the licensing of games that they're going to work with. Apple is putting this highly accurate scanner and putting extra chips in the device to be able to do the algorithms it needs to be able to figure out that it's my face versus someone else's face, or a mannequin, or a 2D print of my face.
I don't even believe that. I mean, if someone has enough photos of me, I believe they could construct a 3-dimensional lifelike replica of my head and easily defeat Face ID. I can't believe that's not possible.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that these devices are in here because it's another mapping system that they can use to use for whatever they're going to do. I don't even know. I don't know what the end game is other than
To kill
make
us all,
me feel
Curtis.
like I'm secure.
They want
Well, you're probably
us
right.
dead. I was going to talk about the Activision Blizzard story about them being acquired by Microsoft, but suffice it to say, Activision Blizzard is a toilet dump of a company now. And my own personal experience with this is recently they came out with a revamped version of Warcraft 3. Now, I know people who are gamers, and they look at me and they laugh at me because I play 2 games in this world, one of which is Left 4 Dead, which is a first-person shooter zombie game that came out in 2007, and the other is Warcraft 3. I forgot what the category...
Battle.net edition?
Yes, and well, I've got the Frozen Throne / Battle.net combo. But Blizzard last year came out with a revised version of Warcraft 3. It was called Warcraft 3 Reforged. And it was an utter and complete failure. It was not at all what people expected. It did nothing for, let's just suffice it to say, it was a big fat embarrassment. And they lost a lot of money. It was one of the most refunded games in the history of gaming. And it stands to reason that now they are looking for somebody to buy them out and stop the bleeding. And Microsoft is apparently going to be doing that. And now it's being held up in court. And I know we need to go. You want to say anything about that real quick?
Well, yeah, just the fact that the gaming industry is slowly being chewed up by the monster that is Microsoft. But
isn't
I
it
find
amazing
funny.
Microsoft managed to pull that off? They don't seem to have the
Yeah.
competence for that sort of thing.
But the thing is that we still, like everything I mentioned about Microsoft in advertising and Windows and the fact that they have a long history of not looking out for us as the consumer, that's all true. But also, the new Microsoft is a lot more open than they were before, not because they think it's the right thing to do, but they know that it gets more eyeballs in front of their product because there's more options available. And
Well, we've gone from
Linux
Linux
isn't
as a
using-
cancer to the Linux kernel is included in Windows 10.
Right. Yeah, you have that. Well, and then with gaming, they've realized they do have the core market for gamers. So let's get all of the systems and the gaming things we can. But they also have become smart enough under their current CEO to know that there's no such thing as a competitor to them if they can sell their products with a competitor. So Sony is trying to block the Activision deal because they're saying several key games, Call of Duty being one of them, if Microsoft gets it, they're going to cut off and they're going to make it an exclusive game to Microsoft, and PlayStation won't be able to have it anymore. And Microsoft is telling them, we'll give you long-term deals. And the thing is that Sony tried to call their bluff and say that they were given a crappy deal and that you should block it for monopoly reasons or antitrust reasons in Europe, because that's the best avenue they have to block this merger. And Microsoft had to come out and say that they offered a 10-year deal where they guaranteed that Sony would have, or PlayStation would have, an access to Call of Duty. And you can't tell me that if Call of Duty on PlayStation, if it was like a blockbuster seller or any of their other games were not blockbuster, or they were blockbusters on PlayStation, that Microsoft's going to say, I'm going to cut that all off because I want Xbox to be the winner solely because I'm a crappy, well, you're not even a corporatist if you do that because you want to go where the money is. And I think the current version of Microsoft realizes that. So I think Sony it's a losing argument. And they also have me annoyed because they don't allow Spider-Man on the Avengers game. If you can only get Spider-Man as a DLC on the Avengers game if you play it on a PlayStation, and I have an Xbox, and that annoys me. So they're crappy for that reason too.
Well, here's something in terms of gaming that I would like to see Microsoft invest in. The inventor of the Oculus Rift says he's built a custom VR headset that he claims will kill the user in real time if they die in the video game. The device is based on the popular anime and novel series Sword Art Online. In that series, players are trapped in an immersive VR combat simulator where if they're killed in that game, they die in the real world. His custom-built VR headset is rigged with charges that will explode if the user triggers a, quote, appropriate game over screen. The inventor said while he has figured out how to make the headset kill the user, solving the perfect VR half of the equation is still many years out. So he says, by the way, this guy, his name is Lucky, Luckey. He says he has not tried on the headset himself, but I want to go back to this previous paragraph where he essentially says, you know, we've got the killing part of it down. We can make this thing kill you, but in terms of the software end of things, there's development to be done there. But it can kill you. We have nailed that feature down. We definitely have all of our R&D money that went into the how do we kill them angle. We feel it was well spent. And now it's time to move on to greener pastures. That's why we're looking for investors. But that is the gaming product I would like to see Microsoft invest in. And I would like to see Steve Ballmer as the public.
Developers.
I'd like to see him as one of the first public demonstrations of Microsoft's new gaming platform.
Can you do you think that guy could game on anything, man? How that would be? I don't think he'd make it very long.
Talking about Steve Ballmer, and we mentioned Linux earlier, and him talking about Linux being a cancer. It makes me want to ask you, with the Linux kernel being included in Windows 10, does this mean you can natively run Linux apps in Windows 10?
So I've used it. So Linux,
or is it virtualization?
It's virtualization still. But they've made it like much higher availability into the system, but it's still a containerized version of Linux.
Well, like, could I like download a .deb file and double click on it, and it's just going to kind of know what to do with it?
I don't know about that. I mean, I've only used it for command line purposes, and I've used it for Docker, which it's really beneficial because you get lower layer access to Linux with it, which you didn't get on Docker in the old versions before they did this. But I don't think it's reached that point to where it's taken over to where you're double clicking. So I could be wrong because I just don't use it like that. If I want to use Linux,
Curtis, if I find out you're wrong on this,
then you're going to get me that headset, and I'm going to test out at least the killing part of it.
So help me God, there will be consequences. Will never be the same.
Hey Curtis, put this headset on and sit down in the bathtub.
Well, it's been a pleasure. It's been a joy. This is your favorite podcast, Is This Secure? I'm Michael. He's Curtis. It's been a pleasure, Curtis, and we'll see you next time. Visit the website, isthisSecure.com. Until next time. Ta.